As I've researched my family tree, my writer brain can't help but create a narrative for each family member. So, as promised, today's story is about Henry Charles Hiscocks and the life he may have led based on the paper trail he left behind. Of course, there's a disclaimer. Just like on the credits of Finding Your Roots, information may change as more discoveries are made. On the 29th of September, 1821, 4 siblings, Elizabeth, age 8, Henry Charles, age 5, Stephen James, age 3, and infant Sarah Whitchurch were all baptized into the Church of England on this same day. They are all the children of Charles and Elizabeth Hiscocks, and this baptism takes place at the St. John Church, Frome, Selwood, in Somerset. It is noted that Charles is a farmer. In addition to these 4 siblings, Henry Charles has an older sister, Martha, who was born in 1808, and a younger sister named Marianne, who was born in 1823. Additional siblings may include Richard, Thomas, and John, or others. Henry Charles was 5 in 1821, which means he was born at the height of the Regency era in England. Made popular by Jane Austen and modern romance novels like Bridgerton, the Regency era lasted only from 1811 to 1820. It borrows its name from George, Prince of Wales, who was named Prince Regent and reigned during the time of his father, George III, was deemed too mentally unstable to rule. Following his father's death, he ruled as George IV from 1820 to 1830. His only legitimate child, a daughter, Princess Charlotte, died in childbirth. So upon his death at age 67, the monarchy passed to his brother, William, Duke of Clarence, who ruled as William IV from 1830 to June 20th, 1837. It is during the last year of William IV's reign that we find Henry Charles in London. On July 19, 1836, Henry Charles Hiscocks marries Mary Fulcher in a church named St. Giles without Cripplegate, which is one of the few medieval churches left in London. About a 45-minute walk from this church is 104 Holborn Street, where Henry Charles and Mary lived when Henry William was born in 1839. Henry William was baptized at the nearby St. Dunstan-in-the-West church. By this time, Queen Victoria, King William IV's niece, had nearly completed her 2nd year on the throne. By 1841, Henry Charles, Mary, and Henry William lived at 18 New Street Square, just a 12-minute walk from the area of London known as Paternoster's Row. Near St. Paul's Cathedral, Paternoster's Row is where publishers and booksellers were traditionally located. From at least 1839 through midsummer of 1843, Henry Charles is employed as a bookseller. Henry Charles and Mary had their 2nd child, a daughter named Frances Eleanor Hiscocks, in 1843, and she was baptized on May 7th. Less than 2 months later, Henry Charles begins his career working as the messenger for the Master of the Horse for the monarchy. He also holds the position of assistant storekeeper at Buckingham Palace. His compensation is £90 per annum, along with a £30 allowance for his livery. Livery is his uniform. This money was most likely for its purchase, cleaning, and upkeep. Other people on the Buckingham Palace employment records are receiving allowances for things like rent, candles, and soap. Henry Charles and Mary have 5 more children in their first decade living in the servant quarters of the Royal Mews of Buckingham Palace. Edwin Fulcher, born 1845, Mary, born 1848, twin boys Thomas and John, born in 1850, and Emma Louisa, born 1851. Sadly, John, one of the twin boys, passes away in 1851. How Henry Charles made his way to London from Somerset is unknown, but at least 2 other siblings, Stephen James and Elizabeth, also made the move. On March 15, 1846, they gathered at a central location, Holy Trinity Church, in the Minories near the Tower of London, to have their children baptized. Stephen James and his wife Caroline had their son Stephen baptized. along with James and Elizabeth Poole's daughter, Ellen Marianne. Edwin Fulcher Hiscocks, the third child of Henry Charles and Mary, also received the sacrament that day. Are you confused by the names yet? Because if you aren't, you probably didn't listen to Spinster Aunt's first 2 episodes, which you should do. And subscribe too. A like wouldn't hurt. Do the YouTubey things. Blah, 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 blah. The names are easily explained. Both Henry Charles Hiscocks and his son, Henry William Hiscocks, have a son named Edwin Fulcher and a daughter named Frances Eleanor. And if you have been paying attention, you know that Fulcher is the maiden name of Henry Charles's wife, Mary. On October 1st, 1868, Henry Charles takes on the additional job of office keeper, for which he receives additional compensation of £30 annually. The amount of money Henry Charles made working for the monarchy was of special interest. Decades into the job, he earned only £110 for the job of messenger and assistant storekeeper. He was only able to earn significantly more money by taking on an additional job of office keeper. Even though he was paid an additional £30 for that position, it is almost £50 less than the amount paid to the woman who held only that job previously. The storekeeper makes £220, the state coachman makes £200, the other coachman makes £150. But just out of curiosity, let's compare his salary to the pages of honor. You may recall that at the recent coronation of King Charles, there were several young men who served as pages of honor to the king. Prince George was one, as well as the son of the Marquis of Cholmondeley. It seems there is a tradition of giving these positions to the sons of the aristocracy. I just chose one randomly, Arthur Ponsonby, mostly because Ponsonby seemed like the most likely name to pop up in a Regency-era romance novel. Ponsonby served as a page of honor from January 5, 1882 to August 16, 1887. Here he is, pictured with Queen Victoria. Arthur, who has a much longer name that we don't need to know, was the son of the private secretary to Queen Victoria, also the grandson to several earls, the most interesting being Earl Grey, of tea fame. He serves in this role from the age of 11 to 16 and earns £230 annually. This set Arthur up for a great future. Ponsonby served in many political and government positions throughout his life. In 1930, he was granted a peerage, Baron Ponsonby of Shawbreed, which still exists today. On the same page of Buckingham Palace pay records for pages of honor, we also find the pay record for Henry Charles Hiscocks. This is a decade later than Henry Charles's previous pay record. For the same year, Henry Charles received £110 for his positions as messenger and assistant storekeeper, £30 for office keeper, and a £30 allowance. After more than 40 years of serving Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Henry Charles Hiscocks earned £60 less per year for doing 3 jobs than this boy, whose job was to walk next to the Queen while wearing a cool outfit. Steady employment for 44 years seems to be something that most of his siblings were unable to replicate. I'll save their triumphs and tragedies for another episode. Henry Charles and Mary's children had the opportunity to grow up in a safe area of London with solid housing, access to education, and food. His oldest son, Henry William, marries Martha Shaw in 1869 and lives and farms in Cheshire. But what about the others? Before marrying in 1874, Frances Eleanor works as a milliner. Edwin Fulcher begins work as a servant, but marries Martha Shaw's cousin Jane Whittle in 1872 in Cheshire. Edwin and Jane seek their fortune in London. There's much more to tell. Thomas begins his career as a haberdasher, but then works as a traveling salesman and draper. He marries a woman named Isabella Mayman, We'll talk more about him too, but frankly, there may be more questions than answers. Finally, there are Mary and Emma Louisa. Mary is also a milliner, and Emma Louisa is a draper. So most of the children entered careers in the textile industry. Today, we may call it the fashion industry. But Mary and Emma Louisa are special to me because they are spinster aunts. We don't know much about what the daily life of Henry Charles and Mary was like while they lived at the Royal Mews. Mary surely spent most of her days raising her children. She may have had millinery or draping skills she passed down to her daughters and sons. There is a record from a trial at the Old Bailey that gives us insight into the tasks of Henry Charles. He testifies in a court case regarding the theft of two 20-pound notes from the mail. The accountant for the master of the horse department had put the notes into a letter that was sent from Buckingham Palace to Windsor. In his role as messenger, Henry Charles registered and posted the letter. The accused was found guilty of stealing the money. By the time he retires from Buckingham Palace in 1888, Henry Charles has served 9 different aristocrats who served 13 terms as the master of the horse. He receives a pension of £124 per annum, which is paid out quarterly at £31. He and his wife Mary and daughters Mary and Emma Louisa moved to Essex. The Hiscocks family makes an impression on the community, making the social page of the local newspaper in Hatfield, Peveril. Mary passes in 1889. More than a decade later, Henry Charles dies on March 9, 1902, at the age of 86. He had outlived Queen Victoria and the Victorian era. Her son Bertie had ascended the throne as King Edward VII, introducing the Edwardian era. Both Henry Charles and Mary are buried in the graveyard at St. Andrew's Church in Hatfield, Peveril, Essex, which is about 50 miles to the northeast of Buckingham Palace. Before his passing, Henry Charles seems to enjoy visiting his extended family. In addition to this 4-generation photograph, we find him on census records in 1891 visiting his nephew, Charles William Henry Cater, who is the son of his sister Martha. Martha's story and that of her children Charles and Emma will be the next story we tell, as it is quite entwined with that of Henry Charles. He seems to have taken very good care of his big sister. The genealogist can look forward to a video comparing Ancestry.com to FindMyPast.com. Thank you so much for watching Spinster Aunt.